So our parents came up to Quebec. They were in New York State, and they both wanted to be, they were kind of into the back to the land farming movement, but they didn't want to have like a animal farm, even though we have them now. They both wanted to do maple syrup because it was a seasonal thing. So they were looking for maple woods in New England, and they found one in Quebec instead. And so in the early 70s, they came up here, and the piece of land that the homestead is on, it was too young, most of the trees on it, most of the sugar maples that had been cut recently, but the government land around, the public land surrounding the property, was being cut at that moment. And the man who sold them the land was trying to get someone to come to harvest, to make maple syrup in order to save the trees from being cut. So they came to save the woods from being cut down, actually. They didn't start right away, but they said they were starting right away. So it took them a couple years to like figure out and get going. But I guess it saved a more mature maple woods from getting cut down. And so they built a little sugar cabin with a winter cabin, lived in a teepee during the summertime, and did the bucket thing until the mid 80s about, when they put the first 5,000 tube setup, and we moved the sugar cabin up towards the house, so all the sap had to be transported there on a wagon, which wasn't a very good idea because the roads were pretty muddy and it was a long way for the sap tank to go, and if it was stuck, it was stuck, and the sap wasn't moving to where it needed to go. Red maple like that one can be like 1.5. What do you say?
Did you get the ones all the way down there?
I got the one on that side of the road. Didn't Ashley get the one on the other side of the road? Around like 90, 94, 95, sometime around then, they built our present sugar cabin, with the plan to then put in a lot more tubing in a lot more of the woods that we had rented already. I think it was already under our operation. We just weren't tapping it the whole time. And then the bigger expansion of trees came in around 99. We slowly added a little section here, a section there. Most of it got kind of pre-cut, selectively cut, in order to make a little more room for the less competition for sunlight for the tops of the maples. Yep, and so that's kind of the way it is. Our older brother Abe, he kind of, as a young boy, understood systems quite well, so he kind of took over rigging things up, just because he was a lot better at it than the parents were, and he still is. And so that's kind of how it went here as for timeline. Okay, we'll put it back in the tree. It's tight.
So the whole system here is on a closed system with vacuum. And so we can tell if there's a leak in the small tubing here if the sap is flowing quickly, or we see that there's no sap. There's probably a leak somewhere along the what we call 5/16 tubing. So here we see that it's coming in quickly, not super quickly, but maybe there's a small leak. Maybe there's a tap that is loose in a tree, and so there's a little air coming in. For example, here, it's not moving very fast at all.
So here we have a little maple tree. It's a red maple, I believe. It got a hole drilled into it. We do a fresh hole every year, and the old hole dries up. And here, this is kind of the old-fashioned, the modern old-fashioned way. The really old-fashioned way was taking a hatchet and chopping a hole into it. And so a little tap and the sap you can see is dripping out into the bucket. The tap has a hook on it to hold the bucket. And then we collect the sap from the buckets into the horse trailer in this situation. Most of our operation has tubes with vacuum sucking it all for collection. And then once we have the sap collected, then it's in the sugar cabin. We have it go through a reverse osmosis. And then we boil it down with a wood fire.
And see that little red thermometer?
Yeah.
So that's telling me however much that sticks up, that's how thick it is.
Starts off around between 2 to 3% sugar, and it finishes off at 67% sugar. Off to the cabin we go.